She left a note saying, "Find someone on your level." My level had a helipad. Some people measure success by what they take from you. I measured mine by what I built when they were gone. My name is Marcus Webb, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, where my father taught me that honest work beats empty words every single time. I'm 52 years old, and I spent 30 years building things that last, roofs that don't leak, foundations that don't crack, structures that protect people when it matters most. I never thought I'd need to rebuild myself, but that's exactly what happened today. I found a folded note beside my coffee mug. I pushed open the front door after a 12-hour shift, my work boots heavy with dried mud and exhaustion. The house felt wrong immediately. Too quiet, too still, like the air itself had abandoned me. I walked into the kitchen and saw my old ceramic mug sitting alone on the counter, the one with the chipped handle I'd refused to replace for 15 years. Beside it lay a folded piece of notebook paper. My hands shook as I opened it. 7 words in her neat handwriting. "Find someone on your level. Amanda." I read it 3 times, waiting for more context that never came. 3 years together, countless mornings sharing coffee at this counter, weekend trips to her mother's place, late-night conversations about building future, all of it reduced to a sentence that felt like a punch to the throat. I walked to our bedroom. Her drawers gaped empty. The closet held only my clothes, hangers dangling like broken promises. Her perfume bottles were gone from the bathroom, leaving only rings of dust where they'd stood. Even the framed photo of us at Lake Erie had vanished. I turned the note over and found an address scribbled in different ink. Her mother's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. My chest burned with something between rage and grief. If you're enjoying the story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. I drove to her mother's house the next morning, Amanda's spare key heavy in my jacket pocket. I'd planned to knock, to be civil, to ask for some explanation beyond 7 crushing words. But Mrs. Patterson opened the door before I reached the porch, as if she'd been watching through the window. "Marcus," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of disapproval. She looked me up and down, her eyes stopping at my work boots. "Men like you should be grateful to keep up." The words hit like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but movement behind her caught my attention. Through the doorway, I spotted Amanda's suitcases stacked neatly by the hall table. Expensive luggage I'd never seen before. And beside them, catching the morning light, sat a man's watch, silver, elegant, clearly expensive. "Is she here?" I managed to ask. Mrs. Patterson's smile widened. She's with someone who appreciates her now. I stood there, key in hand, suddenly aware how small she wanted me to feel. Behind me, a car door slammed. I didn't need to turn around to know Amanda had arrived. I could feel her presence like a storm approaching. He stepped out first, younger than me by at least 15 years, wearing a tailored jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. His hair was styled with product, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about making rent. "Babe, everything okay?" he called to Amanda, who emerged from the passenger side in a dress I'd never seen. She looked different. Hair freshly colored, makeup perfect. The woman I'd known replaced by someone glossier, more distant. She looked at me, then away quickly. Marcus came to return the key. The younger man approached, extending his hand. "Brandon Cole," he said, his grip firm and practiced. "Amanda's told me so much about you, sir." "Sir." The word hung between us like an insult wrapped in politeness. Amanda stepped forward, her voice steady but cold. "It's time I leveled up Marcus. Brandon understands ambition. He's going places." Mrs. Patterson nodded from the doorway, arms crossed, victorious. I placed a key in Amanda's palm without touching her fingers. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said quietly, then walked back to my truck. I didn't look back, didn't slam the door. I simply drove away, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, making a decision that would change everything. No begging, no pleading, only forward motion. Back home, I moved through rooms collecting pieces of her. A designer scarf draped over the couch. Sunglasses she'd left on the nightstand. A book I bought her last Christmas about courage and reinvention. She'd never finished it. The bookmark's still at chapter 3. I found a cardboard box in the garage and packed everything carefully, treating her belongings with more respect than she'd shown me. When I placed her note on top of the folded scarf, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Tommy, my foreman, needed answers about a roof bid I'd been quietly chasing for weeks. The hospital renovation project. Bigger than anything I'd attempted before, the kind of job that could define a career or break it. Boss, they want to meet tomorrow morning. Early. You still interested? I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, surprised to find them wet. Tell them I'll be there at dawn. You sure? I know you got personal stuff happening. I'm sure. I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. We're still in this, Tommy. All the way in. I set the box on my passenger seat. Amanda's life would be reduced to 3 pounds of forgotten things. But beside it on the dashboard lay the project specs. 30 pages of opportunity, waiting to become something real. The hospital parking deck caught the first light of sunrise. 6 stories of concrete and wind that rattled the guardrails. I met Dr. Harold Brennan there, a board member who'd requested this unusual meeting location. He wanted to see the roof firsthand. He'd said, with someone who understood what it meant to build at heights. Most contractors send associates, he said, shaking my hand. You came yourself. I need to see what I'm promising to fix, I replied, following him up the access stairs. The rooftop stretched before us, weathered, patched poorly in places, with outdated lighting and approach markers. They needed a safety overhaul for air ambulance landings. Lives depended on helicopters reaching this space quickly, safely, in any weather. 3 contractors had already submitted bids. I'd seen their proposals, all flashy presentations with premium price tags and vague timelines. I walked the perimeter, measuring with my hands, checking drainage slopes, testing railing integrity. Dr. Brennan watched silently as I photographed stress points and made notes on my weathered clipboard. The others quoted digital systems, imported materials. He said finally, impressive presentations. Lots of technology. I knelt beside a cracked expansion joint, running my finger along the gap. Technology fails when maintenance budgets get cut. Simple, solid fixes last longer. They're just less exciting to pitch. Dr. Brennan smiled. Can you do this under budget without cutting corners? I stood, meeting his eyes. I can do it right, within your budget, and it'll still be working 20 years from now. He extended his hand again. We shook, and I felt something shift, not just in the project, but in me. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease, the kind of place where contractors met before the world woke up. I slid into a booth across from Frank Morrison, a retired air ambulance pilot I'd helped rebuild his garage years ago. He'd called me the night before, said he had someone I needed to meet. The someone arrived 10 minutes later. Captain Elena Torres, med flight director for 3 counties, carrying herself with the calm authority of someone who made life or death decisions at 5,000 feet. Frank says you build like lives depend on it, she said, sitting down without preamble. Sometimes they do, I replied. We talked for 2 hours. Not about bids or contracts, but about missed approaches in fog, wind shear that could flip a helicopter, the cost of 1 minute in a critical patient's life. I didn't pitch my services. I listened, asked questions, learned what kept her awake at night. Captain Torres slid me a business card as we left. We need someone who builds for people, not headlines. Frank trusts you. That means something. In my truck, I stared at her card, then at the empty passenger seat where Amanda's box still sat. 2 paths diverging, one leading backward into bitterness, the other forward into purpose. I chose forward. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to never miss our newest series. The apartment complex sat near the industrial park, surrounded by warehouses and the constant hum of trains passing in the night. The unit was small, 1 bedroom, kitchenette, a bathroom that creaked, but it was mine alone, without ghosts to share mornings or arguments about throw pillows. I moved in with a pickup truck full of essentials: bed, table, chair, tools in the closet. On a shelf by the window, I placed a cardboard box containing Amanda's things, her note facing outward like a challenge I'd accepted. The trains rattled the windows at 2 a.m. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about approach angles and load-bearing calculations. On the nightstand, a yellow legal pad filled with sketches, a project plan taking shape in pencil and determination. Amanda had said to find someone on my level. As I drafted a safety protocol for rooftop landings, I realized I was doing exactly that. I was finding my level, and it was higher than she'd ever imagined, higher in ambition, in purpose, in the people whose lives might depend on getting this right. I fell asleep with the pen still in my hand, the sound of trains carrying me towards something better. My phone lit up while I was reviewing supplier quotes, Amanda's name appearing on the screen, like a ghost I'd already buried. Please stop calling the old landlord about deposits. We've moved on. I read it twice, confused. I hadn't called anyone. I typed back carefully. I haven't contacted anyone. Wish you well. 10 minutes later, my bank app pinged. The hospital retainer had cleared. $20,000. Proof that Dr. Brennan and the board were serious. Proof that my bid had been chosen over flashier, more expensive competitors. I stared at the number, whispering to my empty apartment. Good. Later, I learned from the landlord directly. Mrs. Patterson had called demanding explanations about security deposits, claiming I'd damaged the property. He'd told her the place was spotless and hung up. Amanda's text had been a preemptive strike, trying to control a narrative that didn't involve her anymore. I deleted the message and focused on what mattered, assembling a crew that would help me build something that lasted. Dawn broke cold, and clear as 5 trucks pulled into the hospital parking lot. My crew, men I'd worked with for years, who knew my standards and shared my refusal to cut corners. Tommy, my foreman, built like a fire hydrant and twice as solid. Kenny and Carlos, welders whose joints could hold through earthquakes. Paul, a safety inspector who still believed clipboards mattered more than digital forms. And Big Mike, a concrete specialist who showed up early to every job and stayed late without asking for overtime. We walked the hospital roof together, hard hats bright yellow in the sunrise. I showed them my plans, reinforced landing points, safety lighting that exceeded code, drainage systems that would function in ice storms. Nobody questioned the extra work. They understood this wasn't about minimum requirements. This was about making something worthy of emergencies it would serve. Captain Torres landed once to brief us. The rotor wash flattened my paperwork across the roof, pages scattering like birds. I grabbed what I could, laughing despite the chaos. She powered down and approached. Every landing I make here, I'm thinking about someone's husband, someone's daughter, someone's chance. Make it so I only worry about flying, not the roof under me. I looked at my crew. Let's build it so nobody notices it, because it just works. They nodded and we got to work. The hardware store on Saturday morning was busy with weekend warriors buying plants and paint. I was loading rope and safety anchors when I heard a familiar voice near the grills, loud, confident, performing for an audience. Brandon Cole stood by the checkout, describing his lake house renovation plans to anyone within earshot. He noticed me and his eyes lit up with an opportunity to demonstrate superiority. Hey, Marcus, right? He approached with an exaggerated smile. Hope you're doing okay, sir. Amanda mentioned you might need time to adjust. The cashier, Mary Beth, had rung me up every Saturday for 8 years. She looked from Brandon to me with a question in her eyes. Marcus, how's that hospital project coming? She asked loudly. My sister's a nurse there. She says everyone's excited about the new helipad. Brandon's smile faltered. Helipad. Just a roof renovation, I said, handing Mary Beth my card. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy? She laughed. They're calling it the safest emergency landing zone in 3 counties. You're too modest. I gathered my supplies and nodded to Brandon. Good luck with the lake house. Walking out, I felt lighter, not because of his deflated expression, but because Mary Beth's words had reminded me I was building something that mattered. We poured the footings on a Tuesday morning, concrete flowing into reinforced steel frameworks anchored to the roof's load-bearing points. Paul, the inspector, walked every inch with his measuring tape and level, checking tolerances most contractors ignored. He signed off without a single red line on his clipboard. Then he patted my shoulder, a gesture that said more than words could. "This is how it should always be done," he said quietly. "But it almost never is." I bought the crew black coffee and breakfast sandwiches from the diner. We sat on the roof's edge as the sun climbed, legs dangling 6 stories above the parking lot, eating in satisfied silence. Big Mike broke it first. "You know what this is?" He gestured at the footings, already beginning to cure. "This is craftsmanship. This is the kind of work our grandfathers did." Kenny raised his coffee cup. "To building things right." We all lifted our cups, paper and foam, nothing fancy, and I thought, this is my level. These people who show up, do the work, and go home knowing they made something solid. Amanda had looked for her level in designer labels and polished shoes. I'd found mine in hard hats and honest hands. The concrete dried strong, ready to hold lives aloft. The supply delay came at the worst time. Landing lights, the specialized ones that met aviation safety standards, were backordered for 6 weeks. The vendor offered alternatives, cheaper lights that would probably pass inspection if we didn't look too closely. The hospital CFO called me to his office. He was young, sharp, worried about timelines and budgets. "Marcus, between us, these alternative lights would work. The inspector won't know the difference. We could just pass and move forward." I set my hard hat on his desk. "I'll know the difference. Captain Torres will know. And the first time a helicopter tries to land in freezing rain, the difference might cost someone's life." His expression hardened. 6 weeks puts us behind schedule. 3 days, I countered. "Give me 3 days to find compliant lights, or I'll refund your retainer and walk. But I won't sign off on anything that compromises safety." He studied me for a long moment. 3 days. Captain Torres was waiting outside his office. She heard everything through the thin walls. "I'll wait," she said simply, "however long it takes." That night, I called every supplier I knew, every contact, every favor owed, every connection built over 30 years. At midnight, I finally reached Frank, the retired pilot. "How certified do these lights need to be?" he asked. "FAA compliant, weather rated, the real deal." "I know a guy," Frank said. "Pack your truck." We drove through the night, Tommy, Kenny, and me in 2 pickups, following GPS coordinates to a small municipal airport 3 states away. Frank's contact owned a hangar full of decommissioned equipment, stuff he'd saved from airports closing across the Midwest. We arrived at 3 a.m., the hangar lit by fluorescent strips that buzzed like angry insects. The owner, a grizzled man named Eugene who'd been installing runway lights since the 70s, showed us pallets of certified equipment. "These are surplus from Louisville," he explained, running his hand over the fixtures. "Perfectly functional, every certification intact. I sell them at cost to people who will use them right." The lights were exactly what we needed. Tommy and Kenny loaded them while Eugene and I filled out paperwork on a tool bench covered in grease and coffee rings. "Why do this?" I asked him. "You could charge triple." He smiled, revealing a gap in his front teeth. "Because when my granddaughter got bit by a copperhead last summer, an air ambulance saved her life. They landed on a pad some contractor built right. I figured I'd pass that karma forward. I signed the receipt at 3:17 a.m. with hands that smelled like motor oil and gratitude. On the drive back, watching the sun rise over farmland, I laughed, the first genuine laugh in weeks. Not at anyone, just with the pure relief of knowing I'd kept my promise. The crane operator arrived at dawn, a mountain of a woman named Tess who'd lifted everything from bridge sections to stadium roofing. The modular pad frame waited on the ground. Steel and composite materials we'd assembled with precision, now ready to ascend. Pedestrians stopped on the sidewalk to watch. The crane's arm extended. Cables went taut, and the frame lifted slowly from the parking lot. Wind gusts pushed at it, causing the load to sway, and my heart climbed into my throat. Steady, Tommy mouthed from his position on the roof's edge. Kenny and Carlos waited with guide ropes, ready to pull the frame into alignment. Tessa's voice crackled over the radio, calm as Sunday morning. Winds from the northwest, Gusting to 15. I'm compensating. Just hold your positions. The frame rose past the 5th floor, past the 6th, until it hovered above us. We guided it down, bolting it in place with hardware that would hold through hurricanes. I checked every connection with a torque wrench, measuring tolerances to fractions of millimeters. Captain Torres climbed the access stairs as we finished. She walked the pad's perimeter, testing the surface with her boots, checking sight lines and approach angles. Finally, she looked at me and nodded. "That's a landing I'd trust in sleet," she said. "That's a landing I'd trust with someone I love in the back." Higher praise didn't exist. The phone call came during lunch break, Mrs. Patterson, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Somehow, I was still on an old contact list from when Amanda and I had been invited to family gatherings. "Marcus, I hope this isn't awkward, but we're having a small celebration for Amanda and Brandon's engagement. It would show you're a gentleman if you attended. No hard feelings, right?" My crew watched my face as I listened. I looked at the helipad, nearly complete, and the wall calendar Tommy had hung in our temporary office. The final inspection was scheduled for the same day as the engagement party. "I'll try to stop by after work," I said evenly. Mrs. Patterson's pause told me she'd expected an excuse. "That would be lovely. We'll see you there." I hung up and circled the final inspection date in red marker. Tommy raised an eyebrow. "You're really going to that party?" "Maybe," I said. "Depends on how the inspection goes." Kenny grinned. "Boss, you're a better man than me." I wasn't better. I was just focused on building something that would outlast every petty satisfaction revenge could offer. But if my schedule happened to align, I'd stop by, not to gloat, but to prove to myself I'd truly move forward. The training helicopter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, painted bright orange with MED Flight 7 stenciled on its side. Captain Torres would run simulated approaches while we monitored from the roof. The rotor wash it like a physical force as she descended, dust and loose debris flying in every direction. My cap blew off, sailing over the edge before I could catch it. Kenny grabbed my arm to steady me as the skids touched down perfectly in the center of our pad. Captain Torres powered down and removed her helmet. "The approach feels clean and forgiving," she radioed. "No turbulence from the building's air currents. Landing surface is level and stable." This is textbook. The hospital board's operations director signed the preliminary acceptance form, his hands trembling slightly, not from doubt, but from witnessing something rare, a project completed exactly as promised. "Will you attend tomorrow night's board announcement?" he asked. "They want to publicly thank the contractor, who refused shortcuts." I looked at my phone at the date that matched the engagement party. My throat tightened with a choice I hadn't expected to make. "I'll be there," I said, knowing exactly what I was choosing and what I was leaving behind. The restaurant glowed with candlelight, full of Amanda's family and Brandon's colleagues, lawyers, real estate developers, people whose hands had never held a hammer. I arrived in my cleanest button-down shirt and the same work boots I'd worn the day she left. Mrs. Patterson stood at the center, announcing the power couple's future with champagne and choreographed enthusiasm. Brandon raised his glass, his arm around Amanda's waist, looking like a man who'd won something valuable. Amanda's eyes found mine across the room. She searched my face, clearly expecting to find bitterness, defeat, maybe tears. But I'd left that man on the hospital roof, 6 stories closer to the sky. I approached them calmly. "Congratulations," I said simply. Brandon's grip tightened possessively on Amanda. "Thanks, man. No hard feelings, right?" My phone lit up in my pocket, a text from Captain Torres. "Full board approval. Can you come by? They want to honor the contractor, who refused shortcuts." I smiled, not at Brandon, not at Amanda, but at the message that represented everything I'd built instead of dwelling on what I'd lost. "Excuse me for a minute," I said, stepping toward the hallway. Amanda followed. "What approval?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard in months. The door to my future had just opened, and she was standing in my past. "I've been rebuilding the hospital's helipad," I told her, keeping my voice gentle despite everything. "The project passed inspection today. Full board approval." She blinked, processing information that didn't fit the narrative she'd written about me. The simple contractor who'd held her back, who'd kept her from leveling up. The hospital? That's good for you. Her smile was forced, brittle. Brandon appeared, irritation creasing his perfect features. Babe, they're about to do the toast. Marcus, we're doing great too. Just closed a huge real estate deal. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. Sir, will you be returning inside for the toast? Or will you be leaving for the other engagement? Amanda's expression shifted. Confusion, then calculation. Other engagement? The hospital board wants to do a recognition ceremony, I explained. They're unveiling something tonight. I should probably get going. Stay for the toast, Brandon said, but it sounded like a challenge, not an invitation. I looked at Amanda one last time, seeing not the woman I'd loved, but a stranger who'd made choices that led her here while mine had led me somewhere better. Good luck with everything, I said, meaning it. Then I walked out, leaving the candlelight and champagne behind, heading toward rooftop lights and recognition I'd earned in concrete and steel. The hospital's parking lot gleamed under LED floodlights as I arrived. Elevator up to the roof. 7 floors this time, as they'd added a ceremonial space beside the helipad. The board members waited in the cool night air, along with nurses, paramedics, and a young couple I didn't recognize. Dr. Brennan approached with his hand extended. Marcus Webb, the man who turned a nightmare deadline into a triumph. The couple came forward, 30s, exhausted, grateful. Our daughter Ella had a seizure last month, the father said. The old pad was closed for safety concerns. The ambulance had to drive her 40 minutes. She was okay, but... His voice broke. The mother touched my arm. What you built here, it means our Ella and hundreds like her won't have to wait next time. Thank you. Captain Torres unveiled a small bronze plaque mounted on the access stairwell. Marcus Webb Construction, built with integrity, for those who can't wait. They asked me to say a few words. I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how much this moment mattered. Not for my ego, but for every person who trusted me to do this right. I just refused to build anything I wouldn't trust with someone I love, I said. That's not exceptional. That's the baseline. As I spoke, the pad's approach lights bloomed to life around us, turning the rooftop into a beacon of safety. A local news station filmed a short segment the next morning. Nothing fancy, just a reporter and a cameraman capturing the helipad in daylight. They interviewed my crew, asked about the tight timeline, the under-budget completion, the certification that exceeded standards. The reporter turned to me. Mr. Webb, we heard you insisted on more expensive lighting when cheaper options were available. Why? I thought about Eugene in his hangar at 3 a.m., about Captain Torres trusting my work in a storm, about Ella and the minutes that had almost cost her life. Because loved ones deserve overbuilt, I said. They deserve a contractor who thinks about them, not about profit margins. The piece aired that evening during the 6 o'clock broadcast. My phone filled with messages. Old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. 2 former clients asking about new projects. Tommy's wife saying she cried watching it. And one message from Frank, the retired pilot. Your father would have been proud. This is legacy work. I sat in my small apartment, the one that hummed with train sounds, and watched the segment again. In the background footage, you could see the plaque, the lights, and my crew standing together. No fancy suits. No polished shoes. Just honest people who'd built something that would save lives. Amanda had told me to find someone on my level. I'd found dozens of them, and we'd built a helipad together. Captain Torres arranged something special, a demonstration flight for the board's donors and community partners. Show them what their investment had created. She said. There was 1 spare seat available. She offered it to me. I strapped into the helicopter, headset snug against my ears, as the rotors spun up. The hospital roof fell away beneath us. The helipad I'd built glowing like a compass rose against the city's grid. We banked over the river, lights reflecting off the water, and I saw the world from perspective I'd never imagined. Your level looks good from up here, Captain Torres said to the headset, gesturing toward the illuminated pad below. I laughed, genuinely joyful. It really does. We circled back, and she demonstrated the approach. Smooth, confident, the pads lighting guiding her home through the darkness. As we descended, I spotted two figures waiting by the stairwell access. Even from above, I recognized Amanda's posture, her mother's distinctive stance. Someone had sent them the news clip. Of course they'd come. The skids touched down perfectly. I unbuckled and climbed out, legs unsteady from adrenaline and altitude. The rotor wash made conversation impossible until Captain Torres powered down. Then Mrs. Patterson tried to speak, her mouth moving, but the dying rotors swallowed her words. By the time silence came, Dr. Brennan was approaching with donors in tow, thanking me loudly enough for the entire roof to hear. Amanda stared at the bronze plaque, then at me, seeing someone she'd never truly known. 22. I walked over to them as the donors dispersed, Captain Torres giving me space for whatever needed to happen. Amanda's makeup was fresh, her outfit expensive, the armor of someone who'd spent 3 months proving she'd upgraded. Marcus, she started, but I gently held up my hand. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out her note, the one I'd kept clean and flat all these months. I handed it back to her carefully, like a receipt for a transaction finally completed. You were right, I said warmly, without bitterness. I did find someone on my level. She glanced at the helicopter, misunderstanding written across her face. She thought I meant wealth, access, the trappings of success she'd chased with Brandon. I nodded toward my crew, still gathered near the equipment, toward the nurses watching from the doorway, toward Ella's parents, who'd stayed to see the demonstration flight. People who do the hard work and don't need to be seen for it. I continued. People who show up, build things right, and go home knowing they made something that matters. That's my level. That's always been my level. Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth, but Amanda touched her arm. For the first time since the breakup, I saw recognition in Amanda's eyes. Not of who I was, but of who she'd lost by measuring worth in the wrong currency. The helipad is beautiful, she said quietly. It's functional. I corrected. That's better. 23. Weeks passed. We finished the project 4 days early and $12,000 under budget. I sat in the hospital administrator's office, reviewing the final paperwork, when I made a decision that surprised even me. The remaining fee, I said, I want to donate it to the hospital's air ambulance fund. In my father's name, Daniel Webb, he taught me that work is about service, not glory. The administrator's eyes widened. That's over $10,000, Marcus. I know what it is. I replied, make it count. A small article appeared in the Sunday paper the following week. Local contractor makes quiet act of civic pride. They got the number wrong. Said it was 8,000 instead of 12. But the spirit was accurate. I drove past a lakeside development on my way home from a supply run. Open house signs dotted the street. Real estate agents in blazers guiding couples through model homes. At one house, I spotted Brandon arguing with a contractor on the front lawn, gesturing angrily while the contractor checked his phone, clearly done with the conversation. Mrs. Patterson stood by Brandon's car, arms crossed, looking away as I passed. She saw me but didn't wave. Neither did I. At home, I placed a plaque's replica, a gift from the hospital board, beside my old ceramic mug on the shelf. The note was gone, returned to sender. In its place sat a photograph. My crew on the helipad, hard hats and smiles, the city sprawling behind us. 24. Spring brought new contracts, a school district wanting roof repairs, a church needing structural reinforcement, and another hospital 2 counties over that had heard about my work. I hired 2 apprentices, young guys hungry to learn the right way to build. Tommy joked that we'd need a bigger office soon. Kenny said I should buy a new truck, something without rust and prayers holding it together. I kept the truck. The rust was honest. I ran into Amanda one more time, at a coffee shop neither of us usually frequented. She was alone, laptop open, working on something that made her frown. I ordered my coffee to go and nearly left without saying anything. Marcus, she called out. I turned. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Do you have a minute? I sat, more curious than anything else. I wanted to apologize, she said, not meeting my eyes. For the note, for how I handled everything. You deserve better. Thank you, I said simply. Brandon and I broke up, she continued. Turns out we wanted different things. He wanted image. I don't know what I wanted. Do you know now? I asked. She finally looked up. I think I wanted what you had all along, purpose. You were building things that mattered. And I thought that was boring. I'm sorry I couldn't see it. I finished my coffee, set the cup down carefully. I hope you find it. Amanda, really, do you think? She started, then stopped. Never mind. I left without asking what she couldn't say. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. 25. 6 months after completing the helipad, Captain Torres called me to the hospital. Just come, she said. You need to see this. I arrived to find a rooftop transformed, not physically, but in purpose. A medical helicopter was landing, bearing a teenage boy from a car accident 3 counties away. The approach was smooth. The pad held perfectly. Paramedics rushed him to surgery, and I learned later he survived because those minutes saved by air transport made the difference. I stood beside the plaque with Tommy, Kenny, Carlos, Paul, and Big Mike, the crew who built something bigger than ourselves. This is what we did, Tommy said quietly. We saved that kid's life today, and we'll save more tomorrow. Captain Torres approached with a tired smile. 36 emergency landings since we opened, every single one safe. You built something remarkable, Marcus. We built something functional. I corrected, but I was smiling. That evening, I drove home past Industrial Park, past the apartment I moved into when my world collapsed, past the diner where Frank had introduced me to Captain Torres. I thought about Amanda's note, about how 7 words had felt like the end of everything. But endings are just construction sites for new beginnings. My phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Brennan about a regional hospital consortium interested in my work. Another from Ella's father, sharing a photo of his daughter's birthday party with a caption, "She got to see 8 because of people like you." I pulled into my driveway, no longer the apartment, but a small house I bought with the profits from 3 successful projects. Inside, the ceramic mug sat on the kitchen counter, still chipped, still perfect. Beside it, the bronze plaque caught the last rays of sunset. Amanda had told me to find someone on my level. She'd meant it as a dismissal, a way to make herself feel justified in leaving. But she'd accidentally given me the best advice I'd ever received. I found my level. It had a helipad, a crew that showed up, lives saved, and work that mattered. It had integrity built into every bolt and beam. It had purpose that survived long after the rotor wash settled and the helicopters flew away. My level never needed her approval. It never needed anyone's approval except the people whose emergencies we served, whose children we helped save, whose minutes we protected with concrete and steel, and an absolute refusal to cut corners. I poured coffee into the old mug and raised it toward the plaque. To building things right, I whispered. Outside, a train rumbled past, carrying cargo through the night. But I wasn't in that small apartment anymore, staring at a note that tried to define my worth. I was home, in a house built on foundations stronger than anyone's opinion. Foundations made of honest work, ethical choices, and the quiet knowledge that my level was exactly where it needed to be. High enough to save lives. High enough to matter. High enough that I could finally see the view.